boy, another reminder that Joseph Sua'ali'i is an extraordinary talent.
The way that he just manhandled Mackenzie, then Tupaia, and carried 2 or 3 guys over the line.
The only thing that sort of disappoints me a little bit about from the Waratahs' point of view is that instead of celebrating this win, there's been an awful lot of complaining about the refereeing. What Scott Barrett said kind of is indicative of a guy who just doesn't like to get involved in that media stuff very much, and then came out and played just a little bit angry, which was great to see.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Super Rugby Round 9. Then every week when we do our review, Tony Johnson joins us from Sky Sport. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to get the old mate back in. And Tone, you were there on the weekend. Blues versus MP. I've got 6 quick-fire questions to start with as always. You ready?
Yeah, sort of.
Here we go. Is that the clearest sign yet that the Blues are back?
Ask me next week.
If you were Scott Robertson selecting your first All Black side of the year after the weekend, would Beauden Barrett be your first 5?
Yes.
Was that a blip from the Chiefs, or is it something more worrying than that? Hardly a yes or no answer, that one, is it?
Yeah, okay. The answer is just a blip.
Are the Brumbies
Is
the
that
best?
a yes or a no? I can't, yeah.
Are the Brumbies the best side in Oz, or was that a blip for the Reds?
Probably the best side in Australia. I still like the Reds, but yeah, Brumbies were good.
Crusaders have only lost twice. Are they now the favourites? Are they back to being their best?
Not back to their best, but I think they're on the front row of the grid.
Are New South Wales now a serious threat to win it all?
Yeah, possibly. No, possibly.
Let us kick it off with that game then, because that was the Friday night game.
They should be.
Well,
but I'm not sure that they are.
Tony, what happened in that game? What happened to the Chiefs? This was a Waratahs side that had 102 points put on them, and they were physically weak against both the Hurricanes and Moana Pasifika. What happened?
Well, it's what's been going on throughout this whole competition, Martin, that teams are finding it hard. Some teams are finding it hard to get a winning streak going. It stops at 3. I don't think anyone's gone beyond 3 so far in the competition. And what it says is that if the other team fires up and you perhaps just drop your level a bit, well, the chances are you could lose. And that's what happened. I thought that was a really good performance by the Waratahs. Mm-hmm. One of the things they did was that they targeted Damian McKenzie early on. He took a couple of fairly healthy shots and made a couple of mistakes, and things kind of compounded for him as the game wore on. So he didn't have his best game, and that meant that they never got their flow going. It meant they had to go back to their forwards to try and, make the ground for them. And the Waratahs defended really, really well, particularly in those final stages. It just shows there's something, ticking underneath that motif on their jersey, which was really encouraging.
Well, at home there is, Tony.
Yeah, and they scored what's being described as the greatest try in the history of the universe. It was certainly a very good one, the end-to-end one.
Yes, it was.
It was a great try, fantastic try, and they deserved to win, and the Chiefs weren't up to the standard that they've set for themselves, and so that's what happens in this competition. Now, consistency is going to be the key, and the Waratahs haven't been consistent yet. They should be. They should be in a better place than they are because of the quality that they've got throughout their roster. It's not quite the case, but boy, another reminder that Joseph Sua'ali'i is an extraordinary talent. Yeah,
look, just the way that he just manhandled Mackenzie, then Tupaia, and carried 2 or 3 guys over the line. Yeah. I'm looking at it thinking, if they can get 15 of their very best players from Super Rugby on the park, that Wallaby side has got to be more than competitive against the Lions and us, doesn't it?
That's always been their strength, that no matter how thin their talent might be spread or whatever, I've never ever underestimated Australia's ability to get 15 quality players on the field. They need 23. Lions series, you're probably going to need about 27. But no, I think they will be very competitive against the Lions. The only thing that sort of disappoints me a little bit about from the Waratahs' point of view is that instead of celebrating this win, there's been an awful lot of complaining about the refereeing. And I don't think in the overall balance
I thought Angus had an okay game.
I don't think they were disadvantaged necessarily by the referee. They still won. They still scored that great try. They still showed a lot of ticker. So why are all the complaints about the refereeing? Now, the biggest one to me was the try that was ruled out. I think it was Lalakai Foketi, where he put the ball down in the corner, and James Leckie, who has the ability to see all all the angles available. He's got it all there in front of him, decided that the ball was grounded simultaneously. And as long as he's decided that, it can't be a try.
Well, that's the rule.
Simultaneous is out. When you kick a ball to touch and it lands just a little bit on the white line, that is out. So it could be, out on the full. So I'm a little bit disturbed that there's a report in, I think, the Sydney Morning Herald this morning suggesting that someone in the Super Rugby Commission has said, we might look at changing that law in future. What? So you're going to change the out on the full law as well? You can't, you can't have one way, the other way. I just, it's a nonsense. The fact is, if it's a simultaneous grounding, it's out.
Right.
End of story. Yeah.
Crusaders versus Canes on Friday night as well. Crusaders just taking care of business in that. And this is a side that we saw had lost to Moana. They got blown out in the second half by the Chiefs. But the rest of the time, they're winning their games and they're winning them in a Crusader-like fashion. Whereas I'm looking at my Hurricanes, and going, again, we just can't seem to get anything going at the moment.
Well, for a long time, it looked as though the Crusaders were going to win that handsomely. And then suddenly it all started sort of getting shaky in the last quarter of that game, which is, perhaps just a little bit of a question mark over them. As I say, I've got them on the front row of the grid now. I've still got the Chiefs in pole position, although the Crusaders, have gone to the top, which is an ominous sign, when you consider what's happened in the past. But at the back end of the game, a couple of yellow cards. That was not a good thing for them to happen, because that did open the door for the Hurricanes. And in the end, the Hurricanes had a chance to force a try that could have taken the game to extra time. They just didn't quite get it right at a drive. They kind of lost contact with each other. The ball got swallowed up, and that was the end of it. So they made a good comeback. Crusaders, falling away a bit towards the end, but when they were playing well, it was really good. In fact, some of the stuff in the first half was terrific. And of course, Scott Barrett, who got a bit of a tickle up from a couple of former All Blacks last week.
I thought that was great. I really liked that. I'll tell you what I liked about it, just to interrupt you there. I like the fact that Mills and Jeff said it. I like the fact that Rob Penny went into bat for him and said, you guys have never played in the Fords. I like the fact that Scott Barrett fronted up and said, they're probably right, I'm not at my best form. That's what we want in this comp.
Well, it was all quite grown up, wasn't it? The way it was handled.
Absolutely, mate. It was just a narrative. It was just a bit of criticism, a bit of, responding to that. There's nothing nasty or bitchy or anything about it. It was just a good discussion about something that we were talking about.
Well, what Scott Barrett said kind of is indicative of a guy who just doesn't like to get involved in that media stuff very much, doesn't want to get any debate going.
Doesn't have any social media, he doesn't do any of that stuff, mate.
Not interested. And so he just said what he felt was the best thing to say, and then came out and played just a little bit angry, which was great to see because it reminded us of what a great player he is.
I believe he's been one of the most consistent New Zealand rugby players for years.
For sure. And it's true that over the first half of the competition, he wasn't prominent. But you can bet he was still hitting rucks, and he was still moving bodies, and he was still making tackles. But on Saturday, he was outstanding, and that's all you need to see from the guy. And Friday night. Yeah. And it, if he carries on with that sort of vein now on the run into the end of this competition, then look out.
You were there calling Eden Park, the Blues versus Moana Pasifika. Beautiful sunny afternoon it was. Gorgeous weekend it was here in Auckland. And I asked you right at the beginning, is that the clearest sign that the Blues are back? I saw a post from Hoskins Satutu on his social media, and this is what the young guys do these days, and it was like, have you ever doubted us and all kind of this? Yeah. They only won 3 games out of 8, okay? So they're still below the 500. But I thought that game in particular, they were in control virtually the whole of that game.
I thought they played it really well. They did play for a while reasonably narrow confines, because what they needed to do was they needed to take Moana's game away from them early on, probably take the crowd. There's a lot of support for Moana Pasifika, which was really good to see at Eden Park, but they needed to sort of quieten them down a little bit. So take control of the game, frustrate them a bit. Don't allow them to get the momentum going, because when they get the momentum going, they are absolutely lethal. And so I think the Blues did that pretty well. What was encouraging was that we saw Talia and Clark getting more touches on the ball. Barrett again, Bowden Barrett, I thought controlled things really well.
And a lovely little bit of class from him too, the chip over, and his speed. I thought his speed was excellent as well.
The lead up to that try was controversial, because I think Moana Pasifika definitely had a strong case against whether that was an illegal rip. I felt at the time that it was, and I haven't really changed my mind about that. So that was unfortunate for them. But the way Barrett took it, was great. The only thing I'd say about, but I mentioned before that if they're starting at the moment, the All Blacks, I'm sorry, if the starting 10 in my book is Beauden Barrett.
Yep.
Obviously, Mackenzie's going to be in the mix. It's just going to be very interesting to see how they formulate it. Does they start with D-Mac at fullback and Jordan on the wing, or do they go back to what they were doing last year with Jordan at fullback? And at the moment, it might be D-Mac coming off the bench. But I think Barrett played well, and so they controlled the game pretty nicely. And that got them the win. But really what it is, it's another step back from the cliff. So they were right on the edge of the cliff.
Yep.
And then they took a step back from the cliff last week, and they've taken another step back. But now they play the Crusaders.
Yes, I was just looking at that Friday night.
Yeah, exactly. And so they have got to keep these wins coming, just, to stay in touch with what's going on in the top six. And they're doing that at the moment. They certainly have improved, and that's the most points they've scored all year, which is encouraging.
Shut down MP as well, and what did they only score 17 points, which is I think half of what they had been scoring in every game. So it was come back down to earth with a thump for Moana. At the same time, as you said, any team winning 3 games in a row is actually something unusual in this competition. We haven't seen those kind of streaks happen, and the Blues have got, the Crusaders in the red. So they're going to have to win at least one of those 2 games.
For
and
sure.
They aren't easy. And you've got a red side, which is when Christie's going to talk about more about all the Aussie teams later on in the podcast. But that Brumbies game, 34 unanswered points from being 14 down. Right at the end, the 79th minute, both teams scored a try. Take those off, it was 34 unanswered points. That was impressive. They really did just bury them for that period, I thought, of the game.
It was vintage Brumbies in a lot of ways, and the Reds, well, we were treated to the very rare sight of Les Kiss blowing his stack a bit at his team. We hadn't really seen that happen before. So, I mean, it's a sign of a healthy competition amongst the Australians too, and I think that's going to be a factor. Obviously, we're having quite a few Trans-Tasman games going on at the moment. Towards the end, we'll probably get back to more of the
derbies,
the derby games, as people like to call them. It's only a derby game, really, if it's teams from the same city, Martin.
Actually, that's a good point. That is tradition,
but I mean,
right there,
I know that's the old-fashioned sense.
We've kind of broadened the definition.
Of course, we have, and we like to talk about the Southern Derby between the Highlanders and the Crusaders, and great, it's fine. It adds something to it, but those Australian games. They're going to be cannibalising each other a little bit as well, as much as the New Zealand teams tend to do it. So that's another layer
Brumbies
of
went
intrigue.
straight back to what they were doing. And that awful rolling maul, which I can't stand, but that's their strength, isn't it? And they're scoring tries off it.
Yeah, but you play to it when things are on the line, when you absolutely have to win. You got to play for your strengths. You don't get extra points for sending the crowd home with smiles on their faces because you've scored 7 tries or something like that. You just go for the win, and that's, I think, the message that a lot of teams are saying at the moment. I think it's exactly what Will Jordan said at the end of the Crusaders Hurricanes game. At the moment, it's the 4 points that really matter, and so the Brumbies will be happy with that. The Reds, just a bit of inconsistency there, I think, but again, a strong roster, generally, a well-coached team. It's all nicely set up, isn't it?
Okay, Highlanders we've got to mention as well, because they did have a comfortable win over the Drua, and the Drua now look as though the wooden spoon is theirs. I mean, I kind of figure that they'll probably win a couple more games at home, but their season is gone. They're not making the top 6 from here.
They still have the ability, though, to impact on the title.
Do. I think, and you've been saying that every week, and it's been very perceptive, and that even though a team might look as though they're out, like New South Wales did, all of a sudden they can make a massive impact on another team in their chase for the top 6. So,
and of course, they go back to Fiji.
Yeah, and they get 3 or 4 in a row at home. So
the problem is that they score the most amazing tries, and you see this incredible hand big forwards, steamrolling down the field, breaking, throwing one-handed offloads, all that sort of thing. But if you can't get your basic stuff right, then it's just going to all the bad bits are going to be, going to wipe out the good bits.
Clark on last week, and Clarkie obviously calls all those games over there, and he's just a guy that's actually with them all the time, with the team all the time, and watching that. And some of the things that he threw in about some of the players have got other contracts at the end of the year coming up, which might be distracting. Some of the players have been playing almost back to back to back to back to back, and it's taking its toll. And he said, and also that they've kind of gone away from what they were playing last year, and a lot more controlled rugby into, a lot of individualising going on at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's been disappointing because I've always wanted them to be a factor that every time you go to Fiji,
Yeah. Well, it's still a little bit like that, particularly when you go to Lautoka, and they can still play the most incredible rugby. But at the moment, what they're not doing is they're not looking after a lot of the detail of the game. There's been discipline coming in. Look, that was a good win for the Highlanders, and it was great to see Falau Fakatava back in action. That's a really good sign because you know how electrifying he can be. Again, we saw signs of the potential of Fabian Holland, really big man in the middle of their pack. But having said that, their line-out at times, does not instill confidence. So I think that's something that, they'll have to sort out. But again, even if they don't make the top 6, they will be a factor somewhere along the line. They can beat teams and affect their chances. But look, like the Blues, they are still in the hunt.
Right, and I'm looking at that. I'm looking at that points table, Tony. Crusaders 28, Chiefs 27, Brumbies and Reds both on 23. Are all 4 of those teams in your mind still in the top 6? Unless something crazy happens.
As I said to you last week, I think the Force were 4th going in. They've had the bye. They'll struggle to stay in the top 6.
I believe so.
I think. And
so Waratahs, Hurricanes, Blues, Highlanders, maybe.
Yeah, they're all in the
still in with a chance.
Yeah, and I wouldn't make any predictions either because it really depends on form on the day. One team brings its top game, the other team's a bit off par. Well, there's your result. Doesn't matter what the form is going into it.
A couple of things we've got to finish on. Congratulations to the Blues for winning Piggy Super Rugby.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Back-to-back wins. I think that's the first time, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was good to see people stuck around. I quite like the idea of playing it after the Super Rugby game because it means that fans will stick around and watch and get engaged in the game. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, particularly on a Saturday afternoon, people have got things to do before they go to the park. So I thought that was a good idea. And of course, what we're going to see is the crossover with the Aussies as well, and they're excited about that. And I think that's a good development. I still won't be happy until we have a true Super Rugby competition involving New Zealand, Australia. I think Fiji were in a good position to put a team in, and hopefully a Moana team as well. I think that would be great to see, and it's just been a little bit frustrating that it hasn't come yet. The only thing I'd say is I'm hearing that some of the teams have only been able to train once a week. I don't think that helps.
No.
I think, to keep the standard up.
And we're going to need this with the World Cup coming up.
Yeah, absolutely.
End of the year as well.
But another good thing too is that we've seen some startling young talent come through, and that's so encouraging. And we saw it in the final, very evident in the final, and that's a really good sign because I think there are going to be some challenges to the old guard in the Black Ferns, and that's got to be healthy.
Again, and it seems to be every week we're doing this at the moment, we lose another one, and very sad news. You knew John Mayhew well. I'd met John a number of times, interviewed him a number of times, always just found him really charming company, just a great guy to be around, and one of those people that if you bump into, I always say your day's a bit brighter after bumping into him, isn't it? He's you knew him really well. And look, the tributes have all poured out. There's nothing I can add to that, but he's a friend of yours.
Well, he was a neighbour, not far from me, and so I've lived in the area that I live in over in Northcote. I've lived over there for 32 years, and John and his family not far, and he was always out for, in the early days it was running, and more recently walking, and so I'd say on average over those 32 years I would have bumped into him at least once a week. But you look at it's the incredible breadth of his contribution. Obviously a very good respected GP, a pillar of the Northcote Birkenhead community, absolutely devoted to the Northcote Rugby Club, to Rosmini College where his boys all played, and his son Richard has been coaching Rosmini College, and then you go through to North Harbour. Mm-hmm. He's been there around the North Harbour scene right from the get-go. Might have even stripped. I think he might have actually been on the bench one day when they were down south on the tours that they used to have where you play maybe 3 games in the South Island, and they were a bit short of locks, and so they actually had him on the bench for one. Yeah, because he was a good club lock. He played over 200 games for Northcote. And then, of course, he was around the All Black scene for a long time, and such a great confidant for the players. And, it goes beyond the medical side of it.
Sure.
Those are the guys, you have a chat with, when maybe things aren't going great. And he was definitely one of those players, more than the doctor. He really became part of the management of the team. And look, but as I say, on a personal level, this is going to affect so many people. Just such widespread shock and sadness at his passing.
This is the DSPN